We now return to Illinois Rising, presented by the Illinois Opportunity Project, the radio show discussing honest truth about Illinois policy and politics. Here's AM 560's Dan Proft.
Dan Proft back with Ted Dabrowski, president of Wirepoints, wirepoints.com, this edition of Illinois Rising. And Ted, this is a familiar story, and it's so familiar that one is wont to shrug their shoulders, but I suppose we shouldn't in the interest of math and the future viability of this corporation known as the state of Illinois. Illinois, one notch above junk in terms of its credit rating, sold $500 million in bonds last week. Both Moody's and S&P confirmed this flirtation with junk status. And here again, I thought that largest structural income tax increase that we instituted last year was going to take care of all of our financial problems. Maybe if we legalized dope too, just as a little layer on, then it was going to be the land of milk and honey again. But apparently that's not the case.
Oh, it's amazing, right? Remember, they said, we've got to have this tax hike last year. If not, we're going to be junk rated. And here we are. We're almost there again. And I thought what was fascinating was looking at what Fitch said. They have us 2 notches above junk. They said, look, we'll give you credit, Illinois, if you stop pushing your unpaid bills into future years.
Can't do that. That's a bridge too far.
Don't spend more than in the budget. And if you avoid political stalemate, well, it's obvious that those are the 3 things that are just, existential to Illinois.
Well, and the thing, too, is credit rating. State credit rating is sort of this abstraction I don't think most people internalize in any particular important way. It just gives some contextual information just in terms of comparison. We like to compare ourselves to our other laboratories of democracy, being the meth lab that we are. And that is, we have the lowest credit rating of any state, not just in the nation. We got that with a lot of room. I think New Jersey is 2 or 3 notches ahead of us in second to last place. The lowest credit rating of any state in the nation since Michael Dukakis' Massachusetts more than 25 years ago. So that's something.
Well, it's also a scorecard. Nobody wants to lend to a deadbeat, right? So the scorecard of the guy in your neighborhood who never pays his bills and all that, he can't get a mortgage, or if he does, he has to pay super duper rates. Well, that's exactly what Illinois is like. This credit rating is our scorecard, and it's ugly.
For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by our friend and CNBC contributor and Illinois resident, Jim Iuorio. Jim, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
So why does this matter? One notch above junk, junk rated. What's the big deal?
It's a huge deal. And it suggests to me, and there's little characteristics of this whole situation that leave me with a very worrisome projection in the future. And even little things like $12 billion in unpaid bills that we're paying 12% interest on in the unpaid bills portion. That's significant. Now, there's something this is the worst possible scenario for someone who knows that conservative policies work and that the ones that Illinois is instituting, whatever they're called, don't. And that we floated bonds, and we had a decent rate on them, 4.55 for the 10-year, this most recent offering. Now, the stars completely aligned for Illinois for this one brief moment. Global rates are low, and the thirst for yield is high. Mm-hmm. Everybody looks at U.S. rates and says, "Oh, rates are going up." No, global rates aren't really going up. The German 10-year right now is at 0.51. So to lend money to Illinois at 4.55, although it seems low to you and I because we know the real story here, it seems like a nice fat yield for the rest of the world. But the most important thing is the timing of the federal regulatory and tax decreases at essentially the same time as Illinois tax increases. So the municipal bond market is looking at this and saying, hey, you know what, the Illinois residents are going to be none the wiser here. They may be able to shoulder this because of what's going on the federal level. And even Moody's said what they're concerned the most about is how Illinois manages its problems in case of a future recession. That's like the biggest understatement I've ever heard. Of course, that's the biggest problem.
We can't manage it in a booming market right now. So what's it going to look like in a recession? Hey, Jim, what people like to say that we're just doomsday pitchers and all that, and that people are still buying the bonds. But I think people have to remember, and maybe you can tie this into other crises. People were buying Bear Stearns stock until they weren't, right? Until it collapsed. So isn't this a case where people still buy stuff that's really bad, but eventually it all catches up with them.
Sure. I'll put an even finer point on that, too. People were still selling volatility in equity markets up until right at the end of January, and then everybody got wiped out somewhat simultaneously. When rates are low across the world, malinvestment is encouraged. Bitcoin was bought with both hands up until 20,000. Possibly fake Da Vinci paintings were selling for $500 million. Malinvestment feeds on itself, and everybody says, well, it's been working for a while. Yeah, the trade may go against me at some point in time, but it's fine now, isn't it? And they all reassure themselves, and then they do it.
Well, here's the way out of this, obviously, is you got to increase taxes. Go ahead and graduate them. Sell.
Yeah, sure. Then this conversation is going to be quick, then, right? We'll just fix it that way, and that'll be done, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, let's just get to the fix. The fix is obvious. You got to make fat cats like you and Ted pay your fair share in this state, and the good news is we got presumptive governor, J.B. Pritzker, along with Democrats in Chicago who are keen to do that. So this should get worked out by about this time next year.
Sure, Ted, you want to take that one?
Well, listen, Moody says that Illinois has $250 billion in unfunded liabilities, not the official number the state says of $130 billion. So shouldn't Illinois be junk already? And if it's not junk, why not? And then what happens after that?
Of course it should. The same reason, look at Italian 10-year debt is trading at 175, and Italy is an awful credit risk because they're implicitly backed by the European Union. I think in some ways, and maybe in a minor way, that states' debt is implicitly backed in the investor's mind by the federal government. Now, the tax thing, it's silly. Whoever said the only thing that is unavoidable are death and taxes is just wrong. Taxes certainly are avoidable, in many of the ways even legal. But people will leave the state, or they will domicile elsewhere and domicile their companies. We're seeing that already. And put that on top of the fact that there was already a migration from cold states to warm states over the last 50 years with the advent of air conditioning. And these kind of things will help that along. So will we pay these debts? I would be willing to wager either one of you, every bit of money I've made in my life, that we will default on some of our debt, whether it be pension, whether it be bond. We will within the next, let's call it 5 to 7 years.
And we're talking about this more at the municipal level because, of course, there's no provision at the state level for a bankruptcy reorganization. But it's an interesting conversation to have, particularly with respect to municipalities, that many of whom are in no better shape than the state generally. When you watch or get updated on the story of Detroit and what's happened to Detroit now that it's emerging from bankruptcy and enjoying a bit of a renaissance after reorganizing a situation that they couldn't finance any longer.
No question. If bankruptcy is inevitable, it is better for everybody that it happens sooner. Hell, again, they can declare bankruptcy. But remember, too, states in weird ways can have restructuring as well. They did so in 1933 in Arkansas, and that's the only way that this ever works is if we restructure our debts a little bit.
Well, hey, tell us why would a thing like bankruptcy be good for Illinois? People think it's a horrible thing, and of course nobody wants to go to bankruptcy. But why can it be good? Let the listeners understand that.
Because it takes the heat off while we renegotiate and figure out what's the right thing for our state as far as our borrowing and our pensions and things like that. So there's no question that, like I said, if it's inevitable, and if we agree that it is, the sooner we can do it. Detroit, it's been a long, slow slog for them to get to this reemergence, and now they're here, and it's wonderful to see it happening. But remember the pain that went into that. And remember, too, also, the story of Detroit, which is one of my favorites, and it's about overtaxing people and driving them from the city. People called it white flight at the time. Make no mistake about it, it was green flight. They treated money badly within the Detroit city limits, so money left. That's a very simple equation.
What happens if Illinois' credit rating is downgraded to junk? What happens?
Well, number two, if there's a lot of pension funds that can't hold junk rated, and so that becomes a whole bigger issue where then there'll be less buyers of Illinois debt. So it could be a huge thing.
He is Jim Iuorio, CNBC contributor and Illinois resident and Illinois business owner. The only thing good about that is the CNBC contributor part. Jim Iuorio, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.